When people ask me about the 30s, I always start with that one morning that divided my life into before and after. It was March 1932, colder than it could rightfully be here. A wind blew from the north, tugging at the collar of my coat, as if to remind us that winter was not over yet. We were sitting at breakfast, or, well, what we called breakfast. A couple pieces of stale bread, a little water, and silence. When someone knocked on the door, all of us jumped. My father stood up slowly, the way a man does when he already knows the news won't be good. I saw him close his eyes for a second, like he hoped that if he held his breath long enough, the world might change its mind. But the world didn't. There were two men at the door, one from the bank and the local deputy. They wouldn't look us in the eyes. They just said we had 10 minutes to gather our personal things. 10 minutes to leave the house my father had built with his own hands. 10 minutes to walk away from the walls where my parents used to laugh, where I took my first steps, where we celebrated Christmas, even when we didn't have money for gifts. We packed in silence. Mom took the family photos. Dad grabbed his tools. I picked up a worn-out book I loved as a kid, and for some reason, one small stone from our yard. A silly little thing, but it felt like if I took that stone, I'd take at least a piece of home with me. When we stepped outside, I didn't dare look back. I was afraid that if I did, my legs would carry me straight back inside. The last thing I heard was the door closing behind us. Not by us, for us. We drove off in an old truck my father had bought before the stock market crashed. It stalled every 100 miles, sometimes more. We had to push it, all three of us, and then Dad would jump on the clutch trying to catch the engine. Sometimes it started on the first try, and we'd laugh. Sometimes on the 10th, and nobody laughed then. We spent our first night on the side of the road. We spread a tarp on the ground and pulled a blanket over ourselves, the one thing Mom managed to grab. I remember staring up at the stars. They felt so close, like I could just reach up and touch them. But the cold cut straight through us. We held on to each other for warmth. I heard Mom crying quietly. She thought we were asleep. We pretended not to hear. That night was the first time I felt real fear. Fear isn't the dark. It isn't being alone. It isn't even the unknown. Fear is realizing that tomorrow might be worse than today. Out on the road, we figured out fast that we weren't alone. Thousands of families were heading west, like some great river of people. Some pushed carts, some rode on the backs of trucks, some clung to moving trains, risking their lives just to get a few miles further. People became this strange kind of brotherhood none of us chose. Hardship and hope tied us together. We met all sorts. A man who'd lost his farm and both his sons. One joined the army, the other disappeared after train hoppers beat him for a couple of coins. A woman with 3 kids whose husband had died. She was walking 100 miles looking for seasonal work. And then there were the ones who still found reasons to smile, cracking jokes, telling stories, like their faith in better days was the only thing keeping them going. It's a strange thing, being part of something so big and so sad at the same time. Work was everywhere and nowhere. We took whatever we could get, picking cotton, digging ditches, unloading freight, fixing roads. Sometimes they paid us in coins, sometimes in soup. Dad always said, If we work today, we'll make it one more day. He never complained, not once. But I saw how his hands shook at night. He'd hide them in his pockets so we wouldn't notice. Mom washed clothes for wealthy families. Sometimes they paid her with a bit of food, sometimes with nothing. Her fingers were red and cracked from the cold water, but she kept smiling. She believed that if she smiled, we'd keep going. Hunger deserves its own chapter. There were weeks when we ate once a day, beans, bread, soup made from hot water, and a couple of vegetables. One day we found a meat bone in a trash bin, almost bare. Dad washed it carefully and boiled it. I still remember the taste. And I still don't know if it really tasted that good or if hope added something to it. The cold was worse than hunger. Hunger hurts inside. Cold hurts everywhere. But even in those years, light showed up in places you'd never expect. One day, a stranger handed me a pair of gloves, huge ones almost up to my elbows. He said, "I won't need these anymore, but you've got a lot of living ahead of you." I never learned his name, but I never forgot those words. People shared whatever they had left. Everyone understood. If we didn't help each other, we wouldn't make it. Things finally turned around in 1934 when Dad got a job with the WPA road construction. Hard, dirty, back-breaking work. But it was work. I helped out, handing over tools, carrying water, sweeping. Sometimes they'd give me a few coins. We lived on those coins like they were gold. The day Mom brought home a small piece of meat, Dad closed his eyes and sighed. The kind of sigh a man gives when he feels human again. It was the first time in 3 years we felt like we weren't just drifting. A year later, we rented a little house. Wooden walls, a leaky roof, floors that squeaked with every step. But it was warm, and it was ours. I went back to school, and for weeks it felt like I was dreaming. Dad started laughing again. Mom started singing. We were still poor, very poor, but the fear was gone. And the house became more than a place. It became a feeling that tomorrow existed. If you ask me what those years taught me, I'll tell you this. When you have family, work, and a roof over your head, you're rich, truly rich. Everything else you can survive. We survived the Depression, and you'll survive your hard times too, because strength doesn't come from money. Strength comes from the people who walk beside you.
Thank you for staying with us through this story. Here on this channel, we dive into the voices and memories of people who lived through the hardest decades in American history. The 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. These weren't famous politicians or historical giants. They were regular folks. Parents, workers, migrants, dreamers. People who fought for every day of their lives and still managed to hold on to hope. Their stories remind us that behind every old photograph and every piece of silent footage, there were real human beings. With fears, dreams, losses, laughter, and strength. What they went through shaped the America we know today. And by listening to their voices, we don't just learn history, we feel it. If this story touched you, inspired you, or simply made you think, consider subscribing. Your support helps us keep these memories alive and continue sharing the voices that would otherwise be forgotten. Every like, every comment, every share, it truly makes a difference. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving these stories a place to live again. We'll see you in the next video, with another journey into the past and another voice that deserves to be heard.